to have the general manager of Valley Water, Doug Hedrick, to give us a presentation on the California WaterFix. This will be videotaped, so we want this to get out far and wide. So if you know somebody who's missed it, that should see it, get a dub from Gabe. Doug.
Thank you, Chairperson Hayes, members of the Commission. Appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about the California WaterFix. But since I do see a few people here that may not know exactly what Valley District does, could I spend just a few minutes about the history? So we were formed 62 years ago as the agency that was supposed to go out and find a supplemental water supply for our region. Our region goes from the city of Fontana to and through the city of Yucaipa. And our southern boundary is essentially the county boundary, and our northern boundary is the mountains. So we have a 350 square mile service area, just under 700,000 people. And our primary responsibility is to manage the water supplies, primarily through the import of supplemental supply. In 1960, we were the second agency in the state of California to sign a contract with the state for delivery of water, which was known at the time as the Feather River Project. Today is known as the California State Water Project. We're the fifth largest contractor in the state with an entitlement to that system of 102,600 acre-feet per year. What I'm here to talk to you about today is the latest project to try to reestablish some of the water supply that has been lost to the State Water Project due to primarily endangered species issues in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And the name of the project, as you probably know, is California WaterFix, formerly known as Bay Delta Conservation Plan. Nobody could remember that, so. I have 5 basic topics for today. A little bit of history on the State Water Project, the water supply reliability issues that we're trying to solve with the project, the infrastructure solutions called California WaterFix, how that infrastructure is going to operate, and perhaps most importantly, how we're going to allocate and afford the costs associated with those facilities. So the California WaterFix has quite a lengthy list of obligations, things that it needs to solve. Number 1, of course, is to provide water supply reliability that has been lost. Number 2, based on Governor Schwarzenegger's Blue Ribbon Panel, you may remember 10 years ago, that was formed, which came up with a Delta plan that said we had co-equal goals in the Delta. At the same time we're increasing water supply reliability, we have to take care of the ecosystem, which this project does, by the way. We do that through flexible operations in a dynamic fishery environment. Hopefully by the end of my talk you'll understand what I mean by that. At the same time, the project improves water quality in some instances significantly, especially for those in our service area that run surface water treatment plants on State Water Project water. We significantly reduce the impacts associated with seismic events in and around the Delta, and also the risks that are associated with sea level rise. This is a very brief history of the project, but the California State Water Plan, the first version of that was 1931. That resulted in an act approved by the state legislature called the Central Valley Project Act in 1933. That was the genesis of the State Water Project. It took just a few short years, 38 years, I believe, to actually make the first delivery in the State Water Project. That's the year we took delivery of our first Acre-Foot. Although at the time the project was built and first started delivering, they recognized that there was a piece missing, the piece California WaterFix is trying to fix. At the time, it was called the Peripheral Canal. I'm sure most of you that were here in 1982 remember that name. It was a hotly contested statewide proposition that failed. Multiple efforts since 1982, including the Bay Delta Accord process in 1994, and then the joint federal-state project called CalFed in the year 2000. And here we are in 2017, finally with a project in front of us that can actually solve the problems that were created back when the State Water Project was first built. The State Water Project, 600-mile long system that starts on the Feather River just outside of the city of Oroville, flows down the Feather River. Water is captured behind that dam, flows down the Feather River, joins the Sacramento River just north of the city of Sacramento, is delivered through the Delta into the California Aqueduct, and our piece is about as far away from the origin of this water as you can get. We're that small purple bar that you see right in the middle of the bottom of the state there. 19 dams and reservoirs, 20 pumping plants, 10 power plants. We're the fifth largest producer of power in the state of California, and 662 miles of aqueduct. So California WaterFix is designed to solve 4 different risks, primarily in and around the area that we call the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. We have subsidence, fishery declines, seismic, and sea level rise. I'm going to go through each one of those. First, we're going to zoom in on the environment that we're dealing with. Off to the left is the city of San Francisco Bay, and the Pacific Ocean. To the north, you can see the city of Sacramento. To the east is the city of Stockton. How water gets into the Delta, it's a very interesting area. 80% of the flow that enters the Delta comes from the Sacramento River. This is really good quality. It's essentially snow melt from the northern Sierras. We also get 15% of the flow into the Delta from the south. So the San Joaquin River flows north and the Sacramento River flows south, and they join in the Delta. That provides about 15% of the flow, and it's a very poor quality because it's primarily agricultural runoff. There's another 5% of inflow that comes from the east side rivers, which again is captured in dams primarily and delivered to customers and or to the Delta, and it's primarily snowmelt, so it's very good quality. And then the important thing to remember is this is a saltwater or tidal influenced Delta. So how is water used in the Delta? 76% of the water that is flowing on the surface that comes into the Delta flows out to the Pacific Ocean. 6% of the water is used by agricultural interest in the Delta, and 18% is delivered to the Bay Area and to Central and Southern California. Now, if you were to listen to our detractors, they would have you believe that we are diverting 76%, but it's actually 18%. We're gonna, this is a picture, a view of what the Delta looks like today. It's essentially agriculture, but we're gonna step back in time roughly 170 years, and this is what it looked like before we decided to turn it into an agricultural preserve. This would have been tidal influenced estuary, where during the spring and winter, fresh water would be rushing out of the rivers and the Sierras, pushing the salt water out into San Francisco Bay. In the summer and fall, you would have the exact opposite effect. There would not be enough water coming out of the river, which would mean that the tidal influences would dominate, and this would be salt water. So salt water at certain times, fresh water at certain times. And all of the species that we're dealing with now were evolved to survive in that environment that does not exist anymore. And how did this happen? Well, starting in 1860, the ground, the land in the Delta started to be reclaimed, and it was reclaimed by essentially taking soil, using it to build levees, pumping the water out of the inside of the levee to the outside, and creating farm ground. And that's what's happened to 95 to 98% of the land in the historic Delta. And this is what it looks like today. And don't get me wrong, I like to eat food just as much as everybody else. I'm not against agriculture. The real key is who's responsible for the economic or the ecological impacts associated with taking a saltwater, freshwater estuary and turning it into this. Some would have you believe that it's water agencies' responsibility to do that. simply because we're the most convenient knob to turn. We suggest that our customers should not be responsible for that. The species that used to live inside this estuary and have a hard time living in this should not be the responsibility of water agencies. You can see the levees here. There's 1,100 miles of levees that look similar to this, all of them unengineered, meaning no engineering drawings. These are basically just take a dredging machine, went along this route here that was probably a natural stream 150 to 170 years ago, took dredge material out of the bottom of the stream and laid it on the banks on both sides and created 1,100 miles of these unengineered levees. So why is this important to us? Why do we even care? It's because this is how water supply for 25 million Californians, including this roughly 700,000 that we serve, get a portion or all of their water. We capture water behind Oroville Dam, we release it to the Feather River, it gets commingled with other flows in the Sacramento River, and then we turn our pumps on in the South Delta. SWP stands for State Water Project. That's the state system. CVP stands for the Central Valley Project. That's the federal project. They're the joint facilities. We pull our water through the Delta to our pumps and deliver it to our customers. But in the meantime, we have this very confusing hydrologic situation where flows coming into this from the San Joaquin River trying to mix in the Delta get pulled toward our pumps. Remember, that's the low quality water, the stuff we really don't want. And even worse, at times, due to tidal influences and the level of tides and the outflow of fresh water, we can actually pull commingled salt water back into the Delta when we turn our pumps on. All of those things are really bad conditions for us. So we've built this kludgy, kind of wacky system delivering water through the Delta. This is the condition we're trying to fix. No longer can we rely on this system to deliver water to, what do they say now, California is the 5th largest economy, I think, in the world, something along those lines. Just can't do that anymore. So we call these islands that I showed you the levees going around, but they're really not islands, they're holes. This is what they looked like before we decided to convert them to ag. This is what they look like today. In this condition, the soil is disappearing. It's disappearing through two main processes. The first one is oxidation, where the soil, the peat soil, is actually decomposing and turning into gas. And the other is wind erosion that is leading to these holes, which again are surrounded by unengineered levees. And if you have a levee break, that hole fills up with water. So much so that we now have large portions of the Delta are 30 feet below sea level. So these are surrounded by levees that hold water back, but on the other side of the levee, on the inside of the levee, that what we call the island, which is really a hole, we have a 30 feet deep subsidence. And again, this wouldn't be a problem for us except we deliver our water right through the middle of this zone. So what happens when an unengineered levee sitting on top of feet and feet of peat and liquefiable sandy and silty soils, what happens when an earthquake occurs? Well, of course, it just disintegrates. And that's not a big problem if it happens one at a time. What's the problem is during a seismic event, these levees can fail on multiple islands. And then what happens is what we call the big gulp. So if 3, 4, 5, or 10 of these islands, the levees failed, and now the water is rushing in, where is it going to come from? Pacific Ocean, right? It's the only place that it can. And we all know what water is in the Pacific Ocean. It's salt water. And now our delivery path is completely contaminated with salt water. Up to 1 million acre-feet of water flows into the Delta in the first 3 to 4 days. The cost to eradicate this, because once the salt water gets in there, it's very difficult to get it out, is $40 billion. The U.S. Geological Survey came out with a report. This is a federal government now. that there's a 66% probability that an earthquake of the magnitude that would fail multiple levees in the delta will occur in the next 30 years. 66% probability. In addition to seismic events, we also have, as I mentioned before, a lot of endangered species issues. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, just take my word for it. There's many different fish that are on the verge of extinction. We certainly agree with that. So much so that of the three main species that we're dealing with and the restrictions associated with those three species, we're left with only 3 months a year where there's no restrictions on our pumping. Our concern is how long it will take for someone to find a fourth species that blocks the last 3 months that we have of no regulatory pumping restrictions. This has resulted in approximately a 40% decline in the reliability of both the state and federal projects. We started at about 8 million acre-feet of annual delivery capability, and we're now down to less than 5 million acre-feet, and we don't know where the bottom is, and that's the big concern for us. So now I'm moving from the risks now into the actual facilities that we plan to build to mitigate those risks. Back in 1982, we had what was called the Peripheral Canal. It was an above-ground facility, almost 22,000 cubic feet per second diversion. We used the old school version of mitigation where you essentially go to a regulatory agency, ask them how much it's going to cost me to get a permit. They tell you how much it's going to cost you in water, not money. We pay these permit fees in water, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. A little bit more water, a little bit more water, a little bit more water, and there's no way to ever get it back. We don't do that in the modern world. We do what's called adaptive management, and that's where, when we believe we have science on our side, and we believe that now, that we don't just pay all the costs up front in water. We get permits, we work with the regulatory agencies, and we manage through adaptation to meet the requirements of the environment. At the same time, we're meeting the goals, the needs of our customers. Sounds risky, and it is, but we know that the old way doesn't work. The old way, where it ends, we don't know. It's just more and more water. The new system, again, is a 9,000 cubic feet per second diversion. The old open canal system was roughly 1,400 feet of disturbance for roughly 40 miles. So if you are a farming interest or some other community in the Delta, you can understand why they don't like to have this roughly 1/4 of a mile wide scar on top of the earth throughout their communities. But this is what we have now. Essentially, for the most part, when we're done, they won't even know we're there. Other than a few access pits, and no one on the surface will even know that the California WaterFix, these tunnels, are operating. So we have 3 intakes in the north, so we moved our main intakes out of the delta. 3 intakes to the north. I'll show a picture of one of those in just a minute. They deliver water to an intermediate forebay and then into the dual tunnel system, which is a roughly 30 to 35 miles, right down into where our pumps are right now. This is what one of the modern fish screens looks like. Right now, when we turn on our pumps and pull water to the South Delta, any fish that are caught in those flows, it's a dead end. There's nowhere for them to go. These fish screens are built such that fish are not impinged and fish are not, they don't dead end anywhere. And they work because they're so long, 1,200 to 1,800 feet long, that the entrance velocity into these facilities is so slow, 0.2 feet per second, that even a small fish is not impinged on that plate when you're diverting water. And you can see how narrow the grate is in relation to a penny. So this is a big tunnel project. Twin tunnels, 30 miles long each, 150 feet below surface. We'd be using a pressurized tunnel boring machine. Of course, this is underwater. It's basically underwater boring. 45-foot excavated diameter with a 40-foot finished internal diameter. This is an interesting slide. When we started this process 8 years ago, and started talking about a tunnel, people said we were crazy, and maybe we were, but at that time, a 45-foot diameter tunnel would have been the largest in the world, or close to it. Nobody wants to be the first to build a 45-foot tunnel. Today, we're pretty much right in the middle of large tunneling technology, with many projects much larger than 45 feet in diameter, in design or under construction around the globe. So the way this is going to work, we divert water out of the Sacramento River to the north. It gravity flows all the way to the south, fills up inside of this building, and as long as we're diverting up to 4,500 cubic feet per second, roughly half the capacity of the total system, it can all flow by gravity. Just 10 feet ahead, but as big as these facilities are, you can flow 4,500 cubic feet per second and not turn on a pump. A huge cost savings. Again, this is just a picture of what the tunnel boring machine, it basically is just drilling a hole and then concrete rings that show up in sections, get delivered along the bottom there, and you build the tunnel walls as you're drilling. And the muck goes out through muck trucks out the back end. There'll be somewhere between 6 and 8 of these machines all working at the same time from different locations. You access the machine and install the machine in the tunnel by building these tunnel shafts. How long is this going to take? A long time. Under conventional delivery methods, design, bid, build, it's probably 18 years to commissioning. Using a design, build, or other accelerated program, we can probably cut 4 years off of this. So how do these facilities operate? So I think I've been through most of this, but we have these 3 diversions along the Sacramento River. They deliver water to our pumps. And also, I forgot to mention, but the south diversion that we use today is still going to be accessible to us if all the conditions are right. No fish in the area, water quality is good. We can still deliver water from our south pumping plant. So it's really a dual delivery system. It provides us a lot more flexibility. These are just, I think I went through most of these. These are just the benefits of the new system. So what does this buy us? Here's where we are today, 4.7 million acre feet of delivery capacity between the state and federal projects. Without it, based on current modeling, we would be headed to somewhere between 3.5 and 3.9 million acre feet. And we believe this system gets us up to another 600,000 acre feet in addition to what we have today. But again, this is really a hedge against future regulatory actions that would cause decreases to our existing supply, already compromised supply. Just to give you one example, every storm that comes through the Delta has a similar chart, but I just want to show you how this works. So these are 2 storms that occurred in December and January of 2012. This is what we were actually able to divert. So you can see our diversions went to almost 0 when the flows in the river were 120,000 cubic feet per second. And that is because we had what was called a turbidity cloud, which is just an area of turbid water, cloudy water, that the Delta smelt likes to exist in because they're trying to hide from their predators, just happened to show up in front of our pumps. So we lost almost that entire storm. This is what we would have been able to do had California WaterFix been in play. Interestingly enough, the additional water from California WaterFix essentially matches what we lost due to the biological opinions from the Delta smelt. We're essentially trying to reestablish water supply that was lost due to the existence of an endangered species in the environment where we make our diversions. Another benefit that is not analyzed in the environmental impact report, so we don't take credit for this, but it's real, is the ability to move water in a dry year that we could acquire from, let's say, rice farming type interests in Northern California. Should we be able to work out a willing buyer, willing seller deal, we now have capacity to get it through the Delta that we would with this system that we don't today. Water quality benefits, as you can imagine, us diverting our nice fresh snowmelt out of the Sacramento River instead of letting it mix with all of the other flows, including tidal influence flows. The water quality is going to be increased greatly. Again, for those of you that operate surface water treatment plants, we have several within our service area, this can save an awful lot of money in operational costs. And probably, for our service area, reduce the need to desalinate water and or wastewater in the long term. So our detractors have been trying to convince the state of California residents that somehow if we build this system, we're going to dry up the Sacramento River. That can't happen. So up to 5,000 cubic feet per second flowing in the Sacramento River, we can make no diversions. If there's 9,000 cubic feet per second in the Sacramento River, we can only divert 540 of that, and on and on. Our full capacity only occurs when the river is flowing at 35,000 cubic feet per second or more. In addition to all of those benefits that I just went through, we also have hundreds, thousands of acres of physical habitat that we'll be building. These are the responsibilities we have as a water project. However, all of the other impacts to the Delta that started 150 plus years ago are going to be covered under a separate project called California Eco Restore. Again, this is not the obligation of water agencies to pay for the damage caused by converting a tidal estuary into agricultural land. That's for somebody else to pay for. What are the cost implications? I'm almost done here. So for us, we think, we being the 5th largest contractor, that we're pretty important, but in the grand scheme of things, we're a really small piece of this project. We're 1.3% of the total project. That's how big this project is. Or of the state water project side of it, we're 2.5% of that. There's an estimated cost share between the state water project and Central Valley project of 55-45. And our assumptions include, and our board has adopted a resolution stating their intent to cash finance this project over the 18-year design and construction period. And I'll show you what that means to our customers in just a minute. So we have 29 state water contractors, 24 of which will be participating in this project because the other 5 are non-beneficiaries, meaning they divert their water north of the Delta, so they don't need these facilities. However, the 24 beneficiaries in the Delta and South represent 97.2% of the total supply. When we do our 45-55 split, $9.2 billion out of the $16.7 billion capital and mitigation project cost. Valley District share is $230 million, if we could write a check at the beginning. Lots of cost estimates have gone on, but right now, the best, and this includes a $4 billion contingency, so very conservative. We also have operations and maintenance costs that we need to include when we start analyzing the impacts of a project like this. Those costs would be $900,000 per year for Valley District's customers, in addition to what we already pay. So trying to normalize all of this information to help people within our service area understand what the impacts are to them, because it's hard for people to wrap their brain around a $230 million project. What does that mean to me? So we're using a calculation method that's been used by others. We know that there's about 70% of the use of water within our service area is for residential. The other 30 is commercial and industrial. We also know that we have approximately 190,000 occupied households, and if we assume the facilities are going to deliver water for 50 years, they will deliver water for longer than that, but let's just assume they will deliver water for 50 years. The cash financing cost per household per month is $1.42. Now, if we were to debt finance that, as you can imagine, we're paying interest charges on 30 to 50-year bonds. The cost goes up significantly to $2 to $3.50 per household per month for 50 years. And again, our board adopted a resolution stating their intent to cash finance this project. They're in a position to do that primarily because we've had the dissolution of redevelopment agencies within our service area that has resulted in approximately $20 million a year of property taxes that were derived from our tax rate are now coming to us that were going to redevelopment agencies in the past. If we look at it on a cost per acre foot, we like to analyze every one of the projects that we bring to the board to make sure that it is in line with other options that we have. So again, we look at the modeling, and it looks like somewhere around 16,900 acre feet per year would be available to our customers versus the no project alternative. Again, the capital cost is $230 million. We have O&M for 50 years, 900,000. Adds another $45 million, and we end up with $325 per acre foot, water delivered to our pumping plant at Tracy, California. Pretty reasonable compared to other options that we have available to us. Be happy to answer questions.
Would you tell me, is my water rate going up by $1, whatever you said?
Oh, good. Yeah, good point. So no, this is paid for with property taxes, and it's already been either acquired and it will be paid for out of our reserves, or will come from existing property tax rates. So as a matter of fact, the district board reduced the tax rate by 1 cent per $100 of assessed valuation this year, and most likely we'll have an opportunity to do the same thing next year.
Anybody?
So know that this is not new. This is not new taxes. This is existing.
Anybody have any questions? Anybody from out there have any questions? None? Really? Gee, see how good you are?
Or I bored them to death.
So this, just kind of a point that maybe you can answer to give everybody a perspective. Like you said, the state water contractors are made up of how many contractors again?
29.
29, and of that 26 are participating?
24.
24. So it was going to require a concerted effort by all of those boards to buy in, similar to what what Valley District did. What is the status on all the other agencies at this time?
Yeah, so of the 24 agencies, 12 have taken votes to support. This is state project agencies. None have taken positions of opposition. The others are just not asking their boards. The only agencies out of the 24 that we know of are going to have a hard time paying for this are the agricultural agencies. We have 3 agricultural agencies called state water contractors that are going to have a hard time justifying even these low costs, simply because they're used to paying significantly less than this. So, and if our brothers and sisters in the agricultural community can't participate, we'll resize the project and we'll just move forward. We hope that doesn't happen. We think many of them will realize that this is their last shot. If not, big chunks of the Central Valley will go dry. We know that. It's already happened, but and that's a perfectly legitimate answer, right? If a farmer can't find a crop to justify the cost of this water supply, he's not going to buy it, right? So I mean there's no hard feelings about that. We just need to know whether they're in or out, because it's time for us to move. I think many of them will reconsider, but we'll see. If not, we still move forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Guys. Thank you very much.